So LaTisha, it's good to see you, and I know who you are and I know what
Yes.
you're doing, but could you introduce yourself to the audience?
Yes.
And what's your connection to Scotland?
Yes. My name is LaTisha Gasaway-Paul, and I represent the 4 generations that came before mine at Scotland.
So what motivates you?
You know, I'm glad you asked that question. My great-great-grandfather, William Dove, was a former slave. He purchased 36 acres of land for $210 in 1880. He was actually one of the first former slaves to purchase land in Montgomery County. What's significant about that is because he purchased that 36 acres of land, he purchased at an auction, and others came along and purchased land as well. The Masons came along, the Coopers came along, and by the time my ancestors were done purchasing land in Montgomery County, we owned 500 acres. And unfortunately, we only have 4 acres left.
So how long did that 500 acres left? When did you really start losing the land?
Well, in the 50s and 60s, land was significant value, and luxury homes started popping up all over Scotland. All over Scotland and everywhere had water, sewer, electricity, trash services, all but Scotland. They knew that this land was worth a whole lot of value, but yet they wanted to make sure that we did not have those basic essentials to sustain and live in Scotland. And so the land was valued, but they didn't want the Scotlanders there.
So how did they manage to get rid of most of the land or take most of the land?
Well, by eminent domain, it was a take it or leave it situation. However, Mrs. Siegel,
Yes.
she met Mrs. Mason in 1964. They started Save Our Scotland in 1965, but they needed more progression. They needed to get more involved. They needed more people to help out. So what they did was contact my grandfather, who lived in Scotland. His name was Melvin L. Crawford. They formed Save Our Scotland. My grandfather was the president of the Scotland Community Foundation back then, and they formed Save Our Scotland to save Scotland during that time. You got to remember that when the land was purchased in 1880, the only reason it was allowed to be purchased is because nobody else wanted it. It was too wet and too hilly for farming during that time.
So when did, or how much land was left by the time people started doing Save Our Scotland?
Well, right now today, we only have 4 acres
Right.
left. So the county was taking the land by eminent domain, pretty much saying take it or leave it. This is what you have. So a lot of my ancestors sold off. They did not know the value of the land, but others did, and that's the unfortunate part about that. What they did end up saving Scotland in 1968, we had groundbreaking day. So 100 homes were saved in Scotland, were built by a HUD grant, and that's how Scotland exists today, and that's why we have the 100 homes.
And that's on what, 4 acres now?
Yes, 4 acres left, and that's including the church.
So what's the status of what you're working on now? What have you done? What are you pushing for next?
In 2019, the Scotland Amity Zion Church, we had a flood. Let me take you back to the history of the Scotland Church. In 1905, Scotland Amity Zion Church was founded. In 1915, it became a part of the Amity Zion Church. In 1924, my ancestors built the Scotland Amity Zion Church, the first part, with their bare hands.
And they built it where? Right over here on?
Correct, off of Seven Locks Road. Now see, here's the thing. When they built the church, the homes that were in back were not there, and Seven Locks Road was not in this condition in the area that it is now. It was behind it. So when they moved Seven Locks Road, if the floodplain water pushed back into the basement, and that's what caused the flood in 2019. And we're doing a whole lot of work to raise these funds. The Second Century Capital Campaign with Scotland Amity Zion Church is led by the leadership of Dr. Reverend Evelina Huggins to make sure that we get the money to go back into that church. So that's one project that we're doing to make sure that we're doing that. And then I have the housing project to make sure that we get the 25 homes redone in Scotland. And then I have the Juneteenth, the Scotland Juneteenth Heritage Festival.
Speaking of the Heritage Festival, I mean,
Yeah.
last year's Juneteenth celebration was the biggest Juneteenth celebration in the region. And you have to be really proud of that.
Yes.
And it was really a good thing to see. I mean, given my political bent, I always wondered, how Black people approach the 4th of July as, a liberation moment when it was anything but a liberation moment for the Black community. So do you want to talk about the importance of Juneteenth?
Absolutely, because on June 19th, that's our Freedom Day. 250,000 slaves were freed on this day, and we're going to walk, talk, sing, and shout, just like we did last year, but we're going to walk, talk, sing, and shout this year, but with fireworks. Hallelujah, it's Freedom Day. And I just get excited thinking about it. I get excited talking about it because I understand what it took to get to this point. I understand the blood, sweat, and tears, the work, the hard work. I understand that lives were taken to get to this point. I understand the captivity, the shackles that were there. I understand that we are the elders' wildest dreams, and we're not going to fail them by just ignoring all of the hard work that they put in. And that's why we have Juneteenth, and that's why we're going to signify this holiday and respect it for what it is. It is a sacred holiday. And on Juneteenth, Scotland Juneteenth Heritage Festival is going to make sure that we have the biggest celebration all throughout Montgomery County. We start on June 15th at Bethesda Theater. We have Chuck Brown. We call that opening night. On June 16th, we have the Marriott Interfaith Breakfast at the Marriott Hotel. And the interfaith by far is what brings us together. Just like in the 60s when it was Joy Siegel. Just like now when you have Mr. Rails from Glenstone Museum. The interfaith community, there is power in numbers. When we all come together, anything is possible. And that is on the 16th. On the 17th, we have the basketball clinic. On the 18th, we have the football clinic. And on June 19th, it all goes down. We start with prayer virtually at 7 o'clock. We then go over to 5K at 8 o'clock. We have the village that starts at 9 o'clock. We have the carnival at Cabin John Park, and that starts at 1:30. That's the parade. That's from 1:30 to 2:30. And we have all of these festivities going on. We have rides at the Cabin John Park. We call it the Children's Caribbean Carnival. A day of celebration. And then we also have right in the room that we're sitting in right now, we have the history workshop that talks, and they're going to talk about the history, and not just the history of Scotland, history all over. We have history. There were 8 surviving communities left, Black 8 surviving communities. We want to talk about that. We want to incorporate that. And that's all possible by continuing to make sure that we talk about our history.
So how do, people in the community help you all? What can people in Montgomery County do to help you with the issues you're trying to make right? What are the most important things you feel you could use support for?
Yeah. First, start with knowledge. First, start with knowledge and knowing the history of Scotland and how it plays a role in Montgomery County. Like I said, my great-grandfather, great-great-grandfather, William Dove, was one of the first to purchase land in Montgomery County. That alone is historic, but a lot of people don't know that. They think that we're being invited to the table when the actuality is, no, we've been here. You come have a seat, pull up a chair if you want to, but I'm not leaving what's already mine. And that's the important part of it. In Scotland, Scotland community, Scotland AME Zion Church, we understand that the significance of it. It's important and impactful. When the flood came, there were some people that had the gall to say that we should leave and go somewhere else. Why put $11 million into that church? Because I have souls that have gone before me in that church, and I'm not ready to part away with them. We were there first. Scotland AME Zion Church, it sits on 3 plots of land. I'm not sure if you knew that or not. But those 3 plots of land, one was Leroy Dove, Sarah Sims, who was born into slavery and actually given her land by a former enslaver, and then my grandfather, great-grandfather, James Peter Dove. And they signed that land over to Scotland AME Zion Church for that church to sit on that land. So again, that's just history on history of why we're not leaving. We're going to fight, just like my ancestors did, that built the bridge for us to walk on, and that's why we are resilient the way that we are today. I've seen the work that's been done. The center that we're sitting in right now, and it's named after Betty Carroll Thompson. I attended the Action in Montgomery meetings with her. I'm a witness, a testimony to what hard work looks like. My cousin Barbara, she used to balance the books at church. She attended meeting on meetings on meetings. I was there and watched our testimony. Okay, there's just so many people that I've seen put in the work to make sure for us to be where we are today, and we're not just going to give up on the work that they put in. We're not.
And of course, Joyce Siegel. You know, I knew her late after this had happened, but she was worked in the county, and she was one of the strongest housing advocates we ever had. And I thought that, you know, it was really fitting that she was involved in this, and I know she's come to a number of the celebrations, and it's always good to see her when she's there.
Mrs. Siegel did not have to help us. She did not have any obligation to help us. She did not have any relationship with us, but she stepped out on a limb. She stepped up and stepped out and said, I'm going to do something about that. That is what heroism looks like. That is a hero. She stepped up and she got others involved. If more people stepped up and did the right thing like Mrs. Siegel did, then this world would be a better place.
So have you linked up with the 8 remaining communities?
Of course I have. Of course I have. Yes, we had dinner. Last week we had dinner.
Wow.
Not a representative from all the communities were there, but we had Emory Grove there, we had Sandy Spring there, you know, and obviously Scotland. And it was just a good feeling, and we're moving forward. I've been in contact with Miss Anita Powell from Lincoln Park, you know, and those are some of the moves that we're trying to make. It's important as kinship communities to be together. We're stronger in numbers, there's strength and power. And I have linked up with the communities. I've been in contact with them, whether by phone or email, and we have a lot of work to do. And like I said, when I found out about the Sandy Spring Slave Museum last year, I was like, no way. There's no way that I'm just now knowing about this. We want to get this information into the public school system. We want to make sure that our stories are told, but we want the county to help, but we don't want the county to come and take over. And I think that's where the resistance is of really sharing the information. There's a fine line between helping and overstepping, and a lot of times that there's problems there because people don't know how to decipher the two, right? And because we need your help. And what does help look like? Help looks like by coming to volunteer, by putting Sandy Spring out there, by putting Scotland out there, say, hey, know about this place, go visit. Scotland, know about the history of Scotland. We have people that live in Potomac, ride up and down 7 Locks Road, and do not know about the Scotland community. Not at all. And they say, oh gosh, my house was it was a part of the land that was owned by William Dove, or Sarah Sims, or the Masons, or the Coopers. We have to do better.
We do need to do better. I mean, there are some, like people like Anita, Tina Benjamin, Warren Fleming, Harvey Ziegler before he died, you know, who played an important role in trying to maintain and revive the history of the community. And that's the Emory Grove project, the housing that's going to get built up there is really significant. That's an example of urban removal where, for the good of everybody, they knocked down their houses and built something nicer for other people. And it's nice that we're actually going back up there now. And trying to write that. But I think, to your point, you know, people need help.
Yes, they do.
But people are perfectly capable with help of managing their own affairs. But the help is a necessary thing to offset some of the things that that you don't have access to. So I'm always look at what we try to do is be helpful. But this is your community and you know your history, and it ought to be determined by the people who've lived it and experienced it.
That's it.
I can, you know, ask you what do you need. I shouldn't tell you what you need to do.
That part. That's exactly what I'm talking about. And with a clear mind to come in, one to want to listen, to want to help, but to two actually listen. And that's where it is are you coming in here for the views, the likes, the mentions, or are you coming in here to actually be authentic and help? And that's where it is. And I'm pretty good reader. I'm pretty good at, you know, knowing who's going to come in and help. And if I see somebody that's going to use me, I'm going to tell you now, you're going to get an earful because I'm not, no, that's not what we're doing. And I'm a protector of people, and I want to make sure I help them maintain their peace along the way. And that's also important to me. That's very much so. That's very important.
It's important to the community.
Yes, it is. Yes. Yeah.
So thank you for doing this with me today.
Thank you for your time.
Absolutely.
Thank you, County Executive.